Hi guys. I am going to read a couple more chapters. I think we only have a few left. So I'm going to start, let's see, 30, 31, just two more. So let me read. The next day, Mama called again. I could hear her voice clear across the kitchen when she talked to Bertha. Loud and fast, Bertha kept saying, "Slow down, Carla. And what are you talking about?" Then she said, "Wait, what? Chattanooga? With who? For how long?" Bertha kept shaking her head and her face got redder by the minute. Then she hollered, "What about Charlie? You know, your daughter?" Bertha almost never got mad about anything more than a cat bringing a mouse inside, so it was a bit of a shock to hear her yelling like that. But then it got worse. She lit into Mama, telling her how she needed to get a hold of herself and act like a mother, how she needed to think about somebody besides herself sometimes. "So you're just going to waltz up to Chattanooga and come back and be a mother when you're good and ready? Is that it, Carla?" And then Bertha was staring at the phone in her hand, and the silence on the other end felt heavy and sad there in that little kitchen. "Am I going back to Raleigh?" popped out of my mouth when I wasn't even expecting it to. "No, you aren't," Bertha said. Then she told me how she had some calls to make and I should go down to Howard's. I told Howard everything, starting with that squinty-eyed social services lady, telling us how the situation in Raleigh had improved and ending with Bertha saying, "No, you aren't." And when I was done, he said, "Ain't Bertha the best?" And wasn't that so like Howard, finding the only good part when things are bad? I wondered what he had thought about Mama, who just waltzes up to Chattanooga instead of making orange jello and coffee mugs. For a minute, I even wondered if he still wanted to be my friend, knowing my family was all broken up like it was. But that thought flew right out of my mind when he said, "Let's build a fort." So we spent the afternoon in the Odom's dusty, rumshuckle garage, searching for stuff to make a fort with: scraps of wood, a warped table with no legs, a rusty stop sign riddled with bullet holes. Cotton kept following us around and saying, "What about this?" and holding up something dumb like a broken hamster cage or an empty paint can. Wishbone liked to went crazy, sniffing around for mice and chipmunks or whatever else might have been in the garage, chewing on bags of bird seed or nesting in a busted radiator. Lenny and Burl helped us drag everything to the woods at the edge of the yard, and then Howard wanted to sit on the porch and draw a plan for the fort. Me? I'd just drive right in, but not Howard. He was a planner. We worked on our fort for a while, but it was too hot, so we went inside and laid on the living room floor in front of the fan. I stared up at the water-stained ceiling and said, "I hope I don't have to go back to Raleigh." My voice came out all quivery, and I had to swallow hard to keep the tears from coming. I hoped Howard wouldn't say, "I thought you wanted to go back to Raleigh." He didn't. He said, "You're not." "How do you know?" "I just know." He said that so firm and sure that I felt better right away. After a while, Mrs. Odom came in and told me Bertha had called and that I should go home. So I tied Wishbone's leash to Lenny's bike and headed off up the road with my stomach starting that familiar swirl again. What if Bertha hadn't been able to make things right for me after all? Chapter 31. When I got back, Gus was home from work, sitting in the lawn chair dunking turnip greens in a bucket of water. "Hey there, Butterbean," he called out when he saw me. Wishbone slurped up some of that sandy turnip green water, and me and Gus laughed. Bertha's cat, named Lula May, sauntered over and rubbed her head against Wishbone's leg. He gave me a mournful look, but he let her do it. Later, when Bertha put turnip greens and cornbread and tuna casserole on the table, she told me we would talk about everything after supper. I didn't know what talk about everything meant, so I just said okay, but inside I felt scared. I pushed the tuna casserole around on my plate and didn't say much while Bertha told us some friend of hers whose son ran off and joined the army. "Honest to goodness," she said, "the way she keeps crying and carrying on, you'd think that he jumped off a cliff." After supper, I helped her clear the table, and then we went out on the porch to eat peaches with vanilla ice cream. I watched the lightning bugs twinkle down below and waited for us to talk about everything. Finally, Bertha started. "So, Charlie," she said, "I talked to social services today, and I told them I didn't think your situation at home has improved after all. I told them I thought maybe they'd made a mistake." "You did?" "I did." Then she told me how they agreed to check on things. She repeated some of the social services kind of words like reevaluate and stable environment. "They promised they would get back to me in a few days," Bertha said. "Well, let me tell you, those few days felt like a few years to me. Worry followed me every minute, making my insides flop around and my heart beat like crazy. Howard kept saying, trust me, you're not going back to Raleigh. But when I asked him how he knew that, he said, I can't tell you, just trust me. I wanted to trust him more than anything. But that ball of worry in my stomach just wouldn't go away. And then, of course, lying in bed with Wishbone snoring beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about how wrong I'd been about everything here in Colby, how I hadn't seen all the good things Jackie saw right away, and then I found myself wanting to be more like Jackie again. And Howard, too, both of them always seeing the good in things. I put my head on Wishbone's warm side and made a promise to myself right there in that little room of mine. No matter how things turned out, I was going to try to see the good in things like Jackie and Howard. I knew I'd probably always have to say pineapple once in a while on account of Scrappy's temper that I have, but who knows, if I tried hard enough, maybe someday somebody might even call me good-hearted. Those few days dragged on, and every little thing I looked at nearly turned me into a crying baby, thinking I might be leaving. Bertha stirring, Grits by the stove with a cat at her feet, Gus out in the garden with his greasy baseball cap, picking nasty green worms off the tomato plants. Even the shed and the porch and the lawn chairs and the canning jars lined up in that shelf in my room made me sad. I tried to stay busy at Howard's, but then being at the Odoms liked to broke my heart. That ratty old couch on the porch, the yard full of bicycles and balls and dirty sneakers, and, of course, Howard studying his fort plans like he was building a castle, then heading out to the edge of the yard with that up-down walk of his. Finally, after a few days, the kitchen phone rang while me and Bertha were out on the porch eating egg salad sandwiches for lunch. She answered it and talked for a while, but when she came back out, the look on her face told me something good was about to happen. How would you like to stay here with me and Gus, Charlie? She said. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. Stay? I said. Bertha nodded. Stay. For how long? Then Bertha said almost the exact same words that Jackie had said on the last night in my room, about how Scrappy was going to keep on being Scrappy and Mama was going to keep on being Mama, and then she told me as long as she had a breath in her body, she was going to make things right for me. I wanted to jump up and down and pump my fist and let out a cheer that would echo across the valley below us. I wanted to spread my arms like wings and fly right off that porch and out over the treetops and up into the clouds. I wanted to dance with Wishbone and then dance or race right down to Howard to tell him this good news. But what I did first was hug Bertha. Yes, ma'am, I said. I would like to stay with you and Gus. I hugged her one more time and added, I would like that a lot. Bertha looked at me all teary-eyed and said, guess what I'm doing first thing tomorrow? What? I'm getting every single one of those dang canning jars out of your room. We laughed, and I asked if I could go tell Howard the news. So me and Wishbone raced down to the Odoms and up the porch steps. I banged on the screen door, hollering, guess what, y'all? I didn't even wait for anybody to come to the door. I burst right into their living room, which I know was not a very nice thing to do, but I could not stop myself. Howard jumped up from the couch, and Mrs. Odom came running in from the kitchen, and I said, I'm staying here. I'm not going back to Raleigh. Mrs. Odom hugged me and told me that was the best news ever. But Howard just said, told ya. Then he gave Wishbone half a vanilla wafer and said, I knew you were staying here. But how did you know? I asked. 'Cause that was the other part of my wish, he said. That day at the creek, I wished that you would be my friend and stay here in Colby. You did? He nodded. Yep. And since that part about being my friend came true, and knew the other part would come true too. But I couldn't tell you because of that rule, you know, that you can't tell your wish to anybody or it won't come true. Well, didn't that just beat all, Howard making a wish like that? On my way home, I thought about how I'd made my wish so many times and it hadn't come true. And there was Howard getting his wish on his very first try. Still, my heart felt light as a feather as I turned up the gravel doorway toward Gus and Bertha's. That night after supper, we sat out on the porch and ate blackberry cobbler and listened to Bertha's stories. And then, she said, one time we ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere with 3 cats in the car. Remember that, Gus? He nodded and said, yep. Then Bertha let out a big, contented sigh and said, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought we'd have a family like this. Would you, Gus? A family like this? Is that what she'd said? She had said that. A family, a real family. A family that cared about me and called me Butterbean and was going to take the canning jars out of my room first thing tomorrow. A family that wasn't broken. A family that I'd been wishing on for all those times. I couldn't hardly wait till Sunday when I could find my flower in the Garden of Blessings and write my family on it. Suddenly, Bertha called out, Star, first star, everybody make a wish. I looked up at that star twinkling over the mountains, but instead of wishing, I just closed my eyes and breathed in the piney air. My wish had finally come true. That book is so good. And so I love this author, as I've told you guys before, and I met her and I got a chance to really get to know her because she came to Dale Street and she helped fifth graders way back when write biographies, like interview somebody in their lives that they wanted to learn more about, family members, and then they wrote their biographies, chapter book biography, which was really cool. And I love her. She's very soft spoken, but she's just an amazing writer, and she's amazing with children. So I'm not surprised that she wrote a book like this that's so kind of heartfelt. So the next book that I'm going to be reading, and I may be able to get one in there for Friday, is The One and Only Ivan. And it's one of my favorite books, and it's definitely a fantasy genre, which is what we were headed into when all of this quarantine stuff happened. So we're going to be starting that, and I love it. And so if you haven't read The One and Only Ivan, you're in for a huge treat. If you have, you're in for another treat, because I've read it 3 times and I like it even more each time. So anyway, guys, great to see a lot of you in the Zoom today. We'll try to have a Zoom every week. Sorry about the technical issues. Mrs. Lowry said there's really nothing we could have done to prevent that. So we will just do our best, use the chat feature like we did today. And anyway, I'll see you guys soon.